The Major League Baseball Hall of Fame is home to some of the most interesting names to play the game. Nap Lajoie, Kirby Puckett, Enos Slaughter, hell, there's even a Ulysses F. Grant. But today I want to talk about a guy that Baseball Hall of Fame has missed out on. A guy who has gone overlooked with probably the most common name ever. Bob Johnson. Johnson was born November 26, 1905 on a reservation in Pryor, Oklahoma. Because of his Cherokee roots, he was nicknamed Indian Bob. His older brother, Roy Johnson, also was a Major League outfielder who got his start with the Detroit Tigers in 1929. A former classmate would describe the two brothers as polar opposites, saying Roy was a hothead and Bob was a rather quiet guy. Roy would end up suffering from alcoholism throughout his entire career in his late life. This would end up leading to his divorce and his eventual death in the 1970s. While working as a firefighter, Bob would get into semi-professional baseball by playing for a company team in the Industrial League. He struggled to make it into the major leagues simply because of how many amazing outfielders there were at this time. Because no one was willing to take a risk on the unproven Johnson, he wouldn't get a chance until he was in his late 20s. In 1929, Bob would play for the Pueblo Steelworkers, Wichita Aviators, and the Portland Beavers. His time with the Portland Beavers would allow him to attend spring training with the Philadelphia Athletics. In 1931, Johnson seemed like a lock to make the team. However, manager Connie Mack noticed Bob going out for drinks with some teammates. Worried that Bob may have drinking problems like his brother Roy, and believing in some of the stereotypes about Native Americans and their drinking problems, Bob was cut and sent back to Portland. Of course, Bob wasn't some racist caricature of a Native American. He was an actual person. He had no problem with alcohol and was a very good guy by all accounts. When he finally did break camp with the Athletics in 1933 at the age of 27, he would have a huge breakout year. This is the first strike against Bob Johnson's Hall of Fame chances. There aren't many players who have gotten to the Hall debuting in the majors after the age of 25. Monte Irvin, Willard Brown, and Satchel Paige each made it to the Hall debuting at the ages of 30, 32, and 42 respectively. However, they were unable to debut in their 20s due to segregation in Major League Baseball. These African American stars were subject to the Negro Leagues, and that's where the most of their Hall of Fame stats come from. Mariano Rivera, Phil Niekro, and Old Hoss Radbourn each debuted at the age of 25. Joe McGinty saw his first action at 28, and Hoyt Wilhelm at 29. However, these guys are all pitchers, and pitchers tend to have a wide range of career trajectories that position players simply don't have. That leaves us with Earl Averill, who debuted about a month before his 27th birthday. He was voted in by the Veterans Committee in 1975. Johnson and Averill have very similar career paths. Both played 13 seasons over the same era, had 2,000 hits, had around 400 doubles, nearly the same OBP, and were fairly close in terms of OPS+. Even their wins above replacement stat are fairly similar, with Averill having a 51.1 WAR and Johnson owning a 55.3 WAR. Not too bad for a couple of guys getting started in their late 20s. So where do they differ? Consistency. Bob Johnson was by far a more consistent player. Between 1933 and 1941, while playing for the Philadelphia Athletics, he never had a season with less than 21 home runs or 92 RBIs, and only 2 times did his batting average dip below .292. In fact, during these seasons, he averaged 27 home runs, 107 RBIs, a .299 average, a .396 OBP, and a .138 OPS+. The back half of his career was just as consistent, while finishing his tenure with the Athletics and splitting 3 seasons between the Washington Senators and the Boston Red Sox. Over these 4 years, he averaged about 12 home runs, 80 RBIs, and a .291 average with a .385 OBP and a .141 OPS+. Also, we need to take into account that all of this production is coming after his age 35 season. On the other hand, Earl Averill came out of the gate hot but struggled in his later years. In In a similar 9-year span with the Cleveland Indians between 1929 and 1937, he averaged 23 home runs, 109 RBIs, a 322 average, a 397 OBP, and a 136 OPS+. Again, very similar numbers to what Johnson posted over his first 9 seasons. But in Avrill's last 4, he starts to show his age. While ending his tenure with the Indians and bouncing around to the Detroit Tigers and the Boston Braves, he averaged 7 home runs, 45 RBIs, and a 296 average with a 384 OBP and a 117 OPS+. You may be thinking, yeah, okay, Avrill's home runs and RBIs are down compared to Johnson's last 4 years, but the other stats are at least similar, and you'd be right. But Avril only plays in 317 games over his last 4 years. Johnson plays in 553, making him a much more valuable player because he stays on the field and keeps his consistent play. That is just one Hall of Fame comparison, but what if we took a look at how Johnson stacks up against other Hall of Famers at his position? Since most of his games came in left field, let's take a look at those who have made it to the Hall. For this, we will compare all players by 2 stats primarily, WAR and JAWS. The difference between these 2 stats is that WAR, or wins above replacement, evaluates a player's value against an average replacement. The higher the WAR, the better they are. JAWS, on the other hand, stands for Jaffe Wins Above Replacement Score. This determines worthiness to become a Hall of Famer based on their peak years. When we look at all 21 Hall of Fame left fielders, they have an average WAR of 62.4 and an average JAWS of 51.3. Of the 21 left fielders in the Hall of Fame, 7 have an above average WAR and JAWS stat. These include Ted Williams, Rickey Henderson, Carl Yastrzemski, Ed Delahanty, Tim Raines, Al Simmons, and Goose Goslin. Fred Clark has an above average WAR but a below average JAWS. There is a lot of amazing company in this list, particularly in Williams, Henderson, and Yaz, who are some of the greatest players to have ever played the game. So where does Bob Johnson fall in terms of WAR and JAWS? Well, he has a 55.3 WAR and a 45.4 JAWS. Definitely short of average, but looks pretty good against other left fielders. In terms of WAR and JAWS, Johnson ranks higher than Hall of Famers Ralph Kiner, Joe Kelly, Jim Reich, Heaney Manush, Lou Brock, Jim O'Rourke, Chick Hayfie, and Monte Irvin. That is nearly half of all the Hall of Fame left fielders. Johnson had some great offensive counting stats, especially for his era. 2,051 hits, 288 home runs, 1,283 RBIs, and a 296 career batting average. All things that Hall of Fame voters love to see, but still keeps him just about middle of the pack when compared to the other Hall of Fame left fielders. I think he should be valued even higher than that, though, because he has one skill that many of these other Hall of Fame left fielders don't: a glove. Johnson is what we like to call in the baseball world a 5-tool player. He can hit for contact, he's got some pop in the bat, runs with the best of them, has a cannon of an arm, and can track it down in the outfield like no one's business. It's that last tool, however, that gets overlooked by Hall of Fame voters. Now, we're going to have to rely on some very imperfect stats, but we can prove that his defense is that of a Hall of Famer. Johnson played 1,586 games as a left fielder over the course of his career. That's 17th of all time. He recorded 3,241 putouts as a left fielder. That's 13th of all time. 182 assists as a left fielder. That's 4th of all time. He committed 121 errors in left, which is only 6th of all time. He even turned 28 double plays from a left field, which is 13th of all time. Like I said, these stats are not perfect. If a team has more fly ball pitchers on their roster, their outfield is obviously going to get more plays, more chances for putouts, more outfield assists, and more errors. The stat that I really want to look at, though, is double plays. Double plays from the outfield are extremely rare. The outfielder first has to catch the ball, usually making a pretty good play, and then catch the runner napping either between bases or advancing to the next. This stat really makes the case that his defensive ability is that of a Hall of Famer. Let's talk about one final defensive stat: range factor. Range factor basically determines how much defensive influence a player has on each inning that they've played by looking at the amount of putouts and assists that player has. With a range factor of 2.16 for his career, Johnson ranks 24th amongst all left fielders. This is made even more impressive when you think about the fact that Johnson played the bulk of his career in his 30s, not in his 20s. Today we're used to watching guys who are good in the outfield breaking down over time and having to move to DH or first base, but as an older player, Johnson could still get to the ball better than most. The last strike against him is that he was a quiet guy on some very unremarkable teams. During his 10 seasons with the Philadelphia Athletics, the team failed to ever make it to the playoffs. In fact, the A's were only above 500 in just his first season with the club. During these 10 years, the team lost at least 90 games in 8 of those seasons. In 1943, he was traded to the Washington Senators, who would finish in second place behind the Yankees for the AL pennant. After which, he was purchased by the Boston Red Sox, who finished 77 and 77 in 1944 and 71 and 83 in 1945. Having never made an impact in the postseason, Hall of Fame voters typically look to accolades. Johnson received MVP votes in 1933, 1938, 1939, 1943, 1944, and 1945, but never finished above 5th place for this award. Johnson's consistent bat simply couldn't compete with the production from guys like former teammate Jimmy Fox, Yankees star Joe DiMaggio, and Detroit Tigers ace Hal Newhouser. Since this is the only award that was given out at this time, Johnson is blocked from taking home any hardware. Even though Johnson was never fortunate enough to take home an MVP or go to the playoffs, he was able to participate in 7 different All-Star games over his 13-year career. The key word being participate, seeing as though he only started the exhibition in 1935 and 1944 and did not even make an appearance in 1939 or 1940. Overall, his All-Star appearances leave a lot to be desired. Over the 7 games, he went 1 for 9 with a walk and 5 strikeouts. Because he didn't have any postseason fame, MVP awards, or All-Star game success, the quiet Johnson most likely went overlooked by writers during a time where Hall of Fame voting was even worse than it is today. In the 1950s, writers could essentially vote for any retired player since the 1920s. There was no set list of names. So Johnson only received votes in 1948 and 1956, along with 106 other retired players in both of those years. Based on Bob Johnson's stats and comparisons to other Hall of Famers, I would say he is at least deserving of consideration by the Early Baseball Veterans Committee when they meet to decide the class of 2022 this next December. Sure, he got his start later than most Hall of Famers, and yes, he never won an award or gained playoff glory, but personally, I would say he is a Hall of Famer based on his consistent bat and ability to play the field at an elite level. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, comment below the next case for a Baseball Hall of Fame that I should go over. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon.